Chernobyl was far more disturbing than you were told, and was so deadly that it still kills to this day. But how is this possible? It all began during a night shift in Chernobyl 1986, ironically performing a safety test. But during the procedure, they made a deadly mistake, accidentally lowering the reactor's power to a dangerously low level, not realizing a gas called xenon had been silently building up before, choking the reactor. To fix this, the workers tried to bring up the power by pulling out the safety rods, but this only made it worse. The power spiked so unbelievably fast you wouldn't be able to read the numbers on the gauge, quickly slamming down the emergency button hoping to fix it, when suddenly, one of the most violent explosions in power plant history. So strong it blasted a 1,000-ton lid into the air and blew the entire reactor wide open. Radioactive material 400 times stronger than Hiroshima was now spreading through the sky, literally turning the air blue. Chernobyl workers, firefighters, and even rescue crews were unknowingly being exposed to deadly radiation as they tried helping. But it gets worse. Radioactive dust continued to spread into the nearby town of Pripyat and was completely invisible. The next day, people started tasting metal in the air, eyes were burning, felt nauseous, and had bright red skin, living in this radiation for nearly 2 full days before they were evacuated. But it was already too late. 134 of the first people on site fell victim to radiation poison in just days. And over the span of decades, long-term radiation effects continue taking out thousands of more people, leading to a total loss of around 4,000 lives. These are the terrifying reasons you could never survive at Quetzalcoatlus. First off, they were 3 times taller than you. They stood over 16 feet tall, the height of a giraffe, with a wingspan the size of a bus 35 feet wide, being the largest animal to ever fly on Earth. But it gets more horrifying. They had 5 times better eyesight than humans, easily seeing tiny movements from miles away. And when they spotted you, they could jump up to 8 feet high, taking off from the ground alone. But when they flew, they wouldn't just flap their wings, mostly gliding instead, meaning that you wouldn't hear them coming. And even if you did have a chance to run, their bones are hollow, making them extremely fast, allowing them to reach up to 80 miles per hour when flying, impossible to outrun. But if you still somehow manage to escape under something nearby, you'd quickly figure out flying isn't the only thing they can do. Able to run on all 4s, but it gets worse once they find you, as they didn't have teeth. Instead, they would use their 8-foot-long razor-sharp beak to attack you, picking you out of your hiding spot and knocking you down with it. If you were small enough, they would just swallow you whole. But if you were larger, they couldn't eat too much at once, so they would constantly jab you and throw you around until smaller chunks of you tore off, swallowing you piece by piece. Have you ever wondered how the dodo bird was erased forever and suffered the most tragic extinctions in history? What caused this? It all started about 8 million years ago when a group of ancient pigeons were blown off course by a storm, accidentally discovering an island called Mauritius with no predators and infinite food and fruit. In over thousands of generations, these pigeons lived in paradise, causing their bodies to change. Without a need to fly, their wings grew tiny and bodies grew heavier. And with no danger, their brains forgot how to feel fear, eventually forming the dodo bird. But one day, this paradise was about to meet something horrifying. A group of European sailors discovered Mauritius, walking onto the island, being met with these curious and kind birds that walked straight up to them, which made the dodo a perfect food source. After this discovery, many starving trade route sailors would constantly come back to this island, harvesting fruit, chopping down trees, and hunting dodo birds. But worst of all, these ships carried rats, pigs, and dogs, which often fled to the island, eating their eggs, hoarding all of their food, and taking out living dodos with zero survival instincts, leading the population to drop severely over the next few years. And before the sailors even realized the damage they've done, in 1662, the dodo bird was spotted one last time, going entirely extinct for being too curious and friendly. Have you ever wondered why everyone says the platypus shouldn't exist? And even scientists thought this animal was fake? Why is this? To start, the platypus is a mammal that can somehow lay eggs. As when it was first discovered, it was thought to be some kind of weird bird, a reptile, or even a new class of animal, not making any biological sense. But it gets weirder, as platypus sweat milk. They don't have nipples like normal animals. Instead, when it's time to feed their puggles, glands underneath their skin excrete milk, which they just lick off its body. And that's not the only thing under their fur. On a male platypus's hind legs, they have a venomous stinger, simply kicking to inject venom so strong it can paralyze animals and cause extreme pain in humans for months with no cure. It doesn't stop there. When underwater, they go blind, deaf, and can't smell. Instead, their beak acts as a radar, detecting electric fields, allowing them to find their way around and hunt down prey. But when they catch their prey, they don't even have teeth to chew, putting rocks and gravel in their mouth and grinding everything in their beak. And when they swallow, they don't even have a stomach either, water. Instead, food just passes through their intestines, absorbing nutrients. Then when they have to poop, pee, or even give birth, it all comes out of one singular hole in their body called a cloaca. They're the only known mammal to have 10 sex chromosomes instead of the usual 2, glow blue and green in the dark when shined under a UV light, and are so strange looking, early scientists cut it open looking for stitches, thinking it was a joke. Have you ever wondered why everyone is horrified of the North Sentinel Island, and is impossible for you to enter without being killed? Why is this? Well, on this remote island in the Bay of Bengal lives a dangerous indigenous tribe called the North Sentinelese, who've been isolated on this island for 60,000 years with almost zero contact with other humans. Their language is completely unknown, and their culture is still a mystery, where to this day no one knows how or why they got there. But how are they dangerous? Well, they're known to be extremely violent towards outsiders, attacking anyone that goes near the island, doing things like shooting at boats and aircrafts passing by without any warning, one time shooting a rescue helicopter trying to help them after a tsunami, and even reportedly shot at a National Geographic film crew, hitting the director in the leg. But much worse, many people died trying to visit them. In 2018, a religious missionary attempted to preach to them, but moments later, his body was seen being dragged along the beach. And in 2006, 2 fishermen docked on the islands, not realizing the danger, being ambushed, and were never seen again. And despite the technology and power we have today, we still cannot go near the island, because one simple visit from us could spread diseases their bodies can't handle, wiping out hundreds of innocent people who live there. So it's best to just leave them alone. Did you know humpback whales save animals that aren't even the same species and willingly risk their own lives to help without any benefit? It begins when a humpback whale specifically hears an orca hunting vocalization, or they'll swim full speed towards a sound. It doesn't matter if there's 5 or 20 orcas, they go straight into the chaos for an interesting reason. Not to hunt, but make their way towards the prey and attempt to interfere. First, they'll place their bodies directly in the middle, between the prey and the orcas, using themselves as a shield to protect, taking on bites and attacks since their bodies have tons of blubber. Or above water, they might slap their tails down to splash and scare them away, or even use their flippers to push and shove them off the prey. But sometimes there's too many orcas to block, so they'll use other tactics instead, like flipping upside down and letting the prey sit on their stomach out of the water in safety, continuously defending the prey for multiple minutes and in rare cases hours until the orcas finally give up and swim away. It's theorized they do this because they have cross-species empathy, it's a misinterpreted instinct to defend their calves, dislike orcas, or learn behavior from other humpbacks. But these reasons aren't proven, and to this day, scientists still have no clear answer why the humpback decides to be a hero. These are 10 weird things you didn't know about Napoleon. Firstly, Napoleon was overly obsessed with taking hot baths, often sitting in a tub for multiple hours every day, writing letters and giving orders while servants kept refilling it with hot water, even having a portable emergency bath for active military operations. Next, Napoleon would sometimes disguise himself as a civilian just to hear what people are saying about him. He would walk around France listening to people, having conversations, or sometimes even debating soldiers about himself. But he gets weirder. Napoleon was extremely obsessed with cologne, using it so much it was reported he ordered 50 bottles of cologne every month. At one point, even drinking tiny drops, believing it had benefits. Napoleon also barely slept, only 3 to 4 hours every night, thinking too much sleep made you a weak man. Along with eating extremely fast, finishing meals in under 10 minutes, thinking eating was a waste of time. He also had a severe licorice addiction, always keeping some in his pocket wherever he went. Eating so much of it, his teeth would often be stained black. Beyond that, he would get way too focused during battles, completely ignoring danger, where gunshots and cannonballs would reportedly hit near him and he just kept giving orders. Or also completely forgetting to eat meals, where soldiers literally had to hand or feed him food while he worked. Did you know elephants can flip into a deadly state they can't control, and turn so dangerous even other elephants avoid them? But why? Well, it's called must, a chemical state that hijacks an elephant's brain every 1 to 2 years. Specifically in male elephants, this phase causes a spike in testosterone up to 60 times its normal limit. So much testosterone that fluid begins leaking from their head, smell extremely strong, and leak urine non-stop, no longer the animal they once were. But this is where they get scary. They become uncontrollably aggressive, attacking almost everything, known to charge at animals and even tourists with no hesitation or bluffing whatsoever. Or much worse, they'll go on rampages destroying anything near them, including trees and bushes, flipping cars, or flattening village homes. It's also said they ignore pain, injuries, and deterrence, making them nearly unstoppable. But the darkest things they'll do is brutally stab other elephants with their tusks, throw or push over baby elephants, crushing random animals until death for no reason, and aggressively mount elephants, objects, and in rare cases other animals. Meant for dominance and mating, this phase can last for days or even months, eventually slowing down and turning back to normal. These are disturbing things you didn't know about Genghis Khan that only get worse. First off, you might be related to him. Genghis Khan was estimated to have kids with around 500 to 1,000 different women at the height of his power. So much is believed 1 out of 200 men alive today share genetic lineage linked to Genghis Khan's family. Next, Genghis Khan killed so many people he changed the climate. His raids caused over 40 million deaths, roughly 10% of the world at the time, which left so much empty land that regrew and absorbed CO2 that it caused a slight cooling effect on the planet. But it gets more disturbing. He would psychologically trick you into becoming a mass murderer. Unlike most leaders, Genghis Khan shared his loot with his men and promoted them based on how well they fought and killed, giving his army a huge incentive to slaughter, creating the most brutal people you would ever encounter. Or worse, Genghis Khan's army would reportedly leave bodies on display outside of cities he conquered as a warning to others. Even darker, his attacks were so deadly he erased entire cities off the map. During his raids, he had a rule to kill nearly every living thing, including animals, reportedly creating rivers of blood in the streets. The only survivors would be a few women he picked out for himself, prisoners to use as meat shields, and skilled or smart people forced to help him. With nothing left, entire kingdoms would vanish into the ground, where even archaeologists had a hard time finding any remains. But the most creepy, when Genghis Khan died, legend says all witnesses, including the guards who carried his body, were killed, and all traces were erased, meaning his body could still be out there to this day. Have you ever wondered why everyone fears sharks and see them as monsters, when in reality they're way more misunderstood than you think? But why? Well, first off, sharks don't even like eating humans. Although in movies they're shown as these deadly and soulless man-eaters, most attacks specifically on humans are usually just mistakes or confusion due to misidentification. Not only that, but sharks only kill about 5 to 10 people a year, even though millions of people swim in the ocean daily. You're more likely to die from lightning, deers, or even coconuts, claimed to kill around 150 people per year, although that number is debated. Even crazier, out of 500 different shark species, only 30 have ever bitten humans, and around 3 are real threats. Also, some sharks are known for being calm around humans. For example, lemon sharks often hang out with divers and don't mind being pet, or have even been seen blocking other sharks from approaching divers giving them attention. And in general, most shark species tend to avoid conflict rather than getting themselves involved. But the most insane thing is that sharks have kept the ecosystem balanced for over 400 million years, long before dinosaurs. So without them in the beginning, ecosystems could have collapsed and the world would have developed very differently, meaning we probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for sharks. Did you know that this man saved your life and you probably didn't even know his name? It all started in 1983 during the Cold War. A Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov was on duty inside of a nuclear bunker. His job was simple: watch for incoming nuclear attacks from the US. Night after night, he would pretty much just stare at screens, waiting for nothing to happen. All until one night, when suddenly emergency alarms started blaring. Petrov quickly checked his computer and noticed there was a nuclear missile from the US coming straight towards Soviet territory. Then a few seconds later, 2, 3, 4, 5 missiles were now about to hit the Soviets. All Petrov had to do now was make a call to higher command, but this one decision could literally destroy the world. You see, if he called stating there was a nuclear attack, the Soviets would likely send missiles back at the US immediately in retaliation, which would not only cause destruction, but could be the start of World War III. The computer said the attack was real and a high confidence alert, but Petrov had a gut feeling something was off. He questioned why the US would only send 5 missiles during a nuclear attack, knowing it would be hundreds. And also remember, the computer system he was using was brand new. Despite the pressure and the fact that he could be at fault for disaster, Petrov did call, but claimed the attack was a false alarm, trusting his human judgment over the machine. Everyone inside the bunker sat in silence, knowing they could die at any moment if he was wrong. But as minutes passed, something strange was happening. The missiles weren't showing up on the radar, only on the computer. The missiles should have hit by now, but nothing was happening. Because what none of them knew is that sunlight had reflected off high altitude clouds and tricked satellites into alerting. It was never a real attack, making Petrov's decision one that saved millions of lives. Did you know that ants can turn into zombies and experience the most horrifying process in nature? It all begins when a spore falls out of a fungus called Ophiocordyceps universalis, landing onto an ant. Without the ant even realizing, the spore attaches to its body and melts through a tiny spot in the exoskeleton, forcing its way inside. But this is where it gets disturbing. Under the surface, the fungus will slowly spread, wrapping around its muscles, organs, and taking over the nervous system. But the fungus doesn't want to kill the ant just yet. It wants control. So So over the span of multiple days, it'll quietly feed off the ant's internal nutrients, growing stronger as the ant lives on. And once the fungus becomes strong enough, it'll fully hijack the ant's movements, using chemicals that force the ant's muscles to contract, where the ant will suddenly abandon its own colony, never to be seen again. But the fungus controls the body, not the brain, meaning the ant stays fully aware. The fungus will then make the ant walk up onto an elevated area for one final process. On a high branch or leaf, it'll force the ant to bite down extremely hard on the surface, locking it in place, unable to move. The fungus will then absorb everything left from the ant and create a fungus stalk longer than the ant's body, which kills the ant and releases spores to infect the rest of the colony, repeating the cycle again. How did this stray dog become a US Army sergeant and one of the most respected war heroes in history? It all began when a stray dog wandered into a US military training camp in 1917. At first, he didn't bother anyone, just hanging around the camp, so the soldiers let him stay. And over time, he learned how to salute, march along with troops, respond to bugle calls, and even named him Stubby because of his short tail. But eventually, the soldiers had to deploy to Europe for World War I, intending on leaving him behind since animals weren't permitted on ships. But one of the soldiers named James Conroy built a deep connection with Stubby and decided to smuggle him on board, which ended up being one of the best decisions in history. But things got intense quickly. Stubby was immediately sent into the trenches as nothing more than moral support, where soon after his first few days, a brutal gas attack would injure Stubby, but this moment flipped a switch. After recovering, Stubby became highly sensitive to mustard and poison gas, warning soldiers before attacks even began, saving them multiple times. But Stubby kept learning more, becoming increasingly useful, eventually capable of detecting enemy artillery strikes before impact, spotted enemy movements at nighttime, bit and held onto a German spy mapping out Allied territory, exposing him to soldiers, helped locate wounded men after battles, barking until medics arrived, and got exploded by a grenade, but recovered and continued his services. Where throughout Stubby's career, he not only survived 17 battles, became a celebrity, was promoted to sergeant and won multiple awards, but saved hundreds of lives. And in 1926, Stubby would die peacefully due to natural causes, as a true war hero. These are the horrifying things you would face if you got raided by Vikings. First off, you wouldn't even know they were coming. Viking attacks usually took place early in the morning or at night when most people were defenseless or asleep. But even if you were awake, you wouldn't hear or see them either. Vikings were expert boat builders and made longships that stayed almost completely silent when sailing, sat low in the water barely visible from shore, and made to dock directly on land quickly unlike normal ships. But this is only the beginning. Before your town can even react, they've already been prepared for hours, instantly jumping off their ship entirely armed and organized. After only a minute or two, all at once charging your town, weapons in the air, screaming. Waking you up, their goal now wasn't just to steal everything, but create fear. During raids, they made themselves look inhuman, wearing intimidating clothing, sometimes animal skins, and would immediately start killing to cause chaos. This mix of panic and fear worked so well, most people wouldn't even try fighting back as they broke into your home, looting anything valuable. And if you did, Vikings had years of combat experience over you and were extremely violent. Some were even called berserkers, rumored to take some kind of drugs because they fought in a possessed-like state and ignored pain. So even if you complied, they would sometimes just kill you anyways. But more often, you'd be taken away from your home enslaved, held for ransom, or used in ways far worse. By now, your entire town would be ransacked, homes burned down so it couldn't recover, and survivors taken or left with nothing. And in just hours, they would leave with everything before any defense could get there in time to save you. These are 4 animals with the most overpowered hunting tactics. First, falcons literally turn themselves into missiles. When they spot a prey below, it'll fly up, fold its wings into a bullet-like shape, and dive straight down, clenching its talons into fists while reaching up to 200 miles per hour, then punching the prey so hard it instantly stuns or kills it. Next, cuttlefish can mind control its food. Their skin has special cells that can instantly change colors and patterns, so they use this ability to hijack the prey's senses, purposely flashing colors or making a rippling effect on their body, which looks so insane it confuses and stuns the prey in place, making them an easy target to eat. Even crazier, the antlion has an automatic feeding machine. It'll dig a sandpit designed in a funnel-like shape and sit at the bottom, simply waiting until a prey steps in. Then every time it tries to escape, gravity will slide the sand beneath, slowly lowering them deeper, eventually just sliding straight into the antlion's jaws. Finally, the archerfish has a built-in sniper. Their main diet is insects, which live out of reach on land. So instead, they'll use their tongue, pressing it on a groove inside their mouth, forming a gun barrel-like shape, then compressing their gills, firing a water beam that knocks the bug directly into the water to eat it. These are terrifying reasons you can never survive the Amazon rainforest. First off, there's no escape. When you enter the Amazon, it literally rearranges itself around you. Every footstep you make will be washed away in seconds, and vegetation is so dense that it'll instantly cover the paths you made, trapping you in an endless loop. But it gets worse. As you look for a way out, you also begin to notice the ground is alive. Every single inch of the floor within the Amazon is covered in insects and living things, where even if you try to climb a tree to escape, they're more infested. But this is the least of your problems, as the air within the forest can rot the skin off your body. It's so humid, sweat doesn't evaporate and feels like you're constantly underwater, turning your skin soft and easy to tear, often causing infections that rot to your bone. And if you try to clean off your wounds, there's nothing but piranhas, parasites, and predators waiting for you in the water. Or if you want to cool off, be careful of the 200-degree boiling river. But worst of all, the jungle never sleeps. 70% of all animals in the Amazon are estimated to be nocturnal, meaning the chance of you being hunted in the pitch black is much higher. You'd be covered in 2 times more bugs and deafened by the sounds of the jungle 24/7. And even if you finally hear the jungle fall into peace and quiet, that just means you're the target. Jack the Ripper was far more disturbing than you thought, and was so horrifying he made entire cities afraid to sleep at night. But how is this possible? First reason, all of his murders happened in the same area. Each body was found within walking distance from each other, all killed inside of a small 1-mile radius, and was somehow never seen. But it gets more disturbing. He would hunt his victims at around midnight to 4 a.m., making him almost invisible, purposely attacking in dark or dimly lit areas, and would only last minutes, leaving before anyone could see him. And when the bodies were found, it wasn't just stabs. Some were left unrecognizable, cut open, or found with almost perfectly surgical cuts missing organs. But he doesn't stop there. After every murder, letters claiming to be from Jack the Ripper would be sent to police and officials, mocking or describing the murder in graphic detail. One official even received a message with a piece of human kidney alongside. Even worse, he didn't wear a top hat or cape like it was said, but rather looked completely normal, meaning it could be anyone, which sent London into a full panic. People were terrified to sleep at night and patrolled the streets in groups looking just for him. On top of this, he would barely leave any clues or evidence behind, where police had to investigate thousands of different people and hundreds of different suspects, even including a woman later nicknamed Jill the Ripper. Still, nothing helped. But the darkest of all, there's only 5 victims we know about, with the possibility of much more, which he all did in the span of only 10 weeks, suddenly stopping in November 1888, where still to this day, no one 100% knows who Jack the Ripper is.
Steady trying to find the motive. Why do what I do?
These are horrifying facts no one tells you about Mount Everest that only get worse. First off, dead bodies are used as landmarks. Over 330 people have died on Everest, and around 200 bodies are still there, meaning you'll see people who died years ago almost perfectly preserved, looking like they're still alive, helping climbers remember where they are or where not to go. But it gets darker. As you go up, the air can make you go insane. On Everest, the air is so thin it can lead to a disturbing condition called hypoxia, which starves your brain of oxygen, taking away your ability to think straight, make you hear voices or things that aren't there, take off important gear without realizing, or even walking off path never to be seen again. But it doesn't stop there, as your body will literally start to eat itself. If you manage to climb high enough, you'll reach an area called the death zone, where it's not just your mind anymore. The lack of oxygen makes your muscles become weak, can cause fluid to fill your lungs, non-stop headaches and nausea, your body can't heal, brain swelling, and at any moment you can collapse. And if you think you could be saved, there's no guarantee. When too high up, helicopters are unable to reach you, and rescuing is sometimes impossible, extremely exhausting, or can kill you, often forcing others to leave you behind to survive. But worst of all, it's estimated 50 to 60% of all deaths on Everest are on the way down, meaning even if you finally reach the top, there's no guarantee you'll make it back. These are 10 weird things you didn't know about Cleopatra. First off, she had a secret drinking club called the Inimitable Livers, hosting feasts or parties where everyone drank tons of alcohol, showed off luxury, and reportedly disguised as civilians wandering the streets plastered, pranking, or messing with random strangers. Next, Cleopatra loved to enter places dramatically. More specifically for important meetings, she would arrive on a massive decorated barge with purple sails, gold everywhere, dressed like a goddess, perfume or incense in the air, and had music playing. But it gets crazier. She was only about 18 when she became queen, turned into one of the most powerful and richest women in ancient history, spoke 9 different languages, and actually wasn't praised for her beauty, but more for her extreme intelligence, personality, and smooth voice that could apparently charm anyone. Even more insane, she married 2 of her younger brothers, but both later died after conflicts with her. She would test poison on prisoners to see which ones were the quickest, most painless, or didn't ruin your appearance. One time dissolved a pearl in her drink and chugged it for a bet, and even stuffed herself inside of a bundle of bedding to secretly meet with Julius Caesar and secure her throne. But the most insane, Cleopatra wasn't even Egyptian. She was Greek and was alive closer to the invention of the iPhone than the actual building of the pyramids. Have you ever wondered why the blobfish is called the ugliest animal in the world and made fun of for its looks, when in reality it's not supposed to look like this at all? But why? Firstly, blobfish aren't built like normal fish. Instead of having a tough body and hard bones, they have a jelly-like skeleton and almost no muscles, making them very squishy and fragile, barely able to swim. But this is actually perfect. You see, blobfish live deep in the ocean, around 600 to over 1,000 meters down, where the pressure is 100 times stronger than the surface. So their soft bodies actually help, making them slightly less dense than water, allowing them to float above the seafloor, drifting around eating animals without wasting energy, and look like a completely normal fish. But this is where the problems begin. You see, fishermen use something called trawling nets, which are made to drag along the ocean floor to catch other deep sea animals. But because these nets reach so far down, they often drag straight through the blobfish's environment and catch them by accident, pulling them hundreds of meters out of their natural habitat, where the pressure drops rapidly. Without strong bones and low amounts of muscle, it'll cause their bodies to lose shape. Face stretches and sags downwards, and body collapses into a droopy-looking blob, no longer the animal they once were. And this is the version of the blobfish people take pictures of, making fun of an animal that was never meant to leave its home.
Hello? You? No, fuck.
These are 10 weird things you didn't know about Socrates. Firstly, he was considered extremely annoying, known to constantly walk around public and approaching random people in the street and intensely questioning their knowledge, often exposing them for being wrong, which made many people in Athens hate him. Next, he would sometimes turn into a statue. It's reported Socrates would randomly freeze, standing in place for multiple hours, all throughout day and night, just thinking, where crowds of people and even soldiers would form around him, simply watching. But he gets weirder. He was almost always barefoot, even in winter, wore the same basic clothes every day, and didn't care about money at all, often refusing to take payments and lived extremely cheap. Not even working a job for the last 2 decades of his life, spending all of his time debating philosophy. And he doesn't stop there. He would publicly humiliate powerful politicians in debates so often that he began drawing in crowds and gaining tons of influence, becoming such a problem that he was eventually jailed and sentenced to execution for supposedly corrupting the youth. But the most insane is that Socrates could have escaped. Many friends and even corrupt insiders offered to help him escape the execution, but he refused because he believed escaping would go against all of his beliefs. And on the day of execution, he stayed completely calm, drinking the poison and discussed philosophy with his friends as it slowly paralyzed his body until he finally collapsed. Have you ever wondered why people hate the hyrax and call it the most boring animal on the planet, when in reality it's actually way cooler than you think? First reason, this tiny animal isn't even a rodent, but related to elephants, sharing a similar bone structure, especially in their skull and feet, and even have 2 tiny tusk-like fangs. But they get even crazier, as their feet are extremely advanced, having a soft rubbery padding and sweat glands that keep them moist at all times, allowing them to grip onto surfaces and climb extremely steep rocks almost like geckos. But they don't stop there. They can survive insane falls that kill most other animals because of their small and compact bodies, able to instantly squeeze into tiny rock crevices to escape predators, have one of the most complex communication systems of any animal, able to communicate danger, food, and more to help each other survive, are so organized they poop and pee in the same spot like a bathroom over hundreds or thousands of years, marking their territory, and can even harden into a rare substance called hyraceum, used in perfumes you might have, and are even mentioned in the Bible because of how good they are at surviving in difficult terrain despite being so small and vulnerable. But the most insane is that even with no real strength or speed, they've been around way longer than humans and outlived many species, surviving for around 30 to 40 million years, nowhere near as useless as people thought. These are 10 weird things you didn't know about Leonardo da Vinci. Firstly, he would randomly follow people in the street. More specifically, if he had a large nose, protruding chin, or a weird face, he would reportedly trail you for hours just sketching you in his notebook. Next, he was a chronic procrastinator, taking years to finish paintings and often left many of his projects unfinished to start new ones, where the Mona Lisa itself took over a decade. But it gets weirder. He wrote everything backwards, writing from left to right, using a mirror to see what was on the paper, making it almost impossible to read on its own. He carried a tiny notebook everywhere he went in case he had an idea or wanted to draw. Had little to no formal education, yet still learned science, anatomy, and engineering by himself. He was believed to be a vegetarian, extremely rare for the time, and would buy caged birds just to set them free, and even liked pranking people with his lizard, decorating it with wings, a beard, eyes, and horns to make it look like a dragon, then setting it free and scaring his guests. But he doesn't stop there. He would secretly dissect human bodies and study them, creating some of the most accurate anatomical drawings in history. Absolutely hated war, but designed tons of deadly war weapons, and predicted things similar to tanks, helicopters, parachutes, diving gear, and more, being hundreds of years ahead of his time.
What? I see this as an absolute win.
Did you know that emerald wasps are terrifying mind controllers and can hijack cockroaches' brains to walk to their own death? It all begins when an emerald wasp smells and spots a cockroach, tracking onto its movements and positioning itself for an ambush. Once you're in the perfect spot, it'll quickly fly in before you could even react, landing onto your body and stinging you in two precise areas. First into your thorax, which paralyzes your front legs, then specifically stinging you in the part of your brain that controls your instincts to escape. And it only gets worse from here, as the cockroach now is almost in a zombie-like state, completely passive and no longer resisting. The wasp could easily kill you here, but it has a far darker plan for you, grabbing you by the antenna like a leash and walking you away without control, dragging you all the way into a burrow it's specifically designed for your death. Once inside, it'll let go and lay a singular egg on you, walking out and sealing the burrow shut, leaving you with no escape. And eventually the egg hatches a larvae which slowly eats you over the span of multiple days, not only still alive but not even realizing what's happening. Over time, the larvae burrows deeper, feeding on your insides and hollowing out your body as it grows, all until you eventually die. And after a few weeks, a fully grown wasp will rip its way out of your body, starting the cycle all over again. These are the horrifying steps you would face if you got lost in the Appalachian Mountains. Firstly, you won't even realize you're lost. It only takes one wrong turn off trail that looks like the right direction, and the forest can start to repeat itself every direction you turn, realizing you're lost far too late, which is why many have disappeared in these seemingly calm mountains. But it only gets worse from here, as the weather can flip almost instantly. Due to the high elevation of the mountains, clear skies can turn foggy in just minutes, making it easy to get lost even with experience. Then if you think screaming for help will save you, the trees and bushes will work against you, acting like a barrier, muffling screams or sounds you make, nearly impossible for people to hear you at a distance. Or if you want to call for help and open up a GPS, signal is unable to reach you here, leaving you on your own. Even creepier, these mountains are over 400 million years old, older than mammals, dinosaurs, and trees, not meant for humans like you, which you'll realize after seeing abandoned towns, mines, and old roads with no signs of life, just silence, causing your brain to start playing tricks on you. Many hikers report hearing voices, whistling, and a weird presence following them in this isolation, repeating all of this over and over as your body gets weaker, until eventually there's no trace you were ever here at all. How did this cat survive a sinking ship, then another, and another, every time it should have died? It all began during a World War II naval attack on a German battleship with a stray cat on board. A critical part of the ship being struck, sinking in the middle of the Atlantic, killing 2,000 soldiers, only leaving 115 survivors. But somehow, the cat survived, clinging onto a piece of wood rescued by British sailors. And this was only the beginning. They took the cat on their own ship with food, shelter, and even named him Oscar. Everything was perfect, until suddenly, the ship was torpedoed by a German U-boat. A massive explosion ripped through the ship, killing 150 soldiers instantly. But against all odds, Oscar survived, eventually being moved to a safer ship this time. Back to being a mascot with food and shelter, nothing could go wrong. Then out of nowhere, another German U-boat torpedoed the ship, ripping a hole through it. Everyone forced to quickly evacuate. But this time, Oscar wasn't spotted. The ship fully sinking with no sign of the cat. The rescuers searched the wreckage, finding nothing. But then in the distance, clinging onto a small piece of wood once again, was Oscar, according to the legend, earning the new name Unsinkable Sam. Did you know about this frog that basically freezes itself to death on purpose? It all begins in winter, where the species called the wood frog will, instead of protecting itself from the cold like normal animals, hide right on the surface, not underground, strangely letting itself freeze in the extreme temperature. Their body turns frozen solid, ice literally forming in their veins. Breathing and heartbeats stop, and becomes completely unresponsive. Any other animal would be dead at this point, but this frog has different plans. Inside its body, a surge of glucose floods its system, acting like a natural antifreeze, protecting its cells from dying, allowing it to stay frozen, essentially dead, for 7 to 8 months. And once winter is over, it simply thaws out, waking up like nothing happened. 8 weird laws you'd be forced to follow living in the Roman Empire. Firstly, if you hated someone and wanted to write a mean song or poem about them, it was believed damaging someone's honor or image like this was equivalent to physically attacking them, executing you. Next, if a thief broke into your house, you weren't allowed to kill them, only able to defend yourself if they showed a weapon or if it took place during nighttime. If you were caught singing next to your neighbor's crops suspiciously, Romans thought you were using a curse to weaken your neighbor's crops and make your own grow faster, treating it like real theft, punishing you. But it gets crazier. If your favorite color to wear is purple, it was reserved for high-ranking people and elites only, taking your clothes and fining you. Maybe you're a woman married to a man. Well, he would legally own you if you stayed with him for a year straight. If you were struck by lightning, you weren't allowed to have a proper funeral. Believe their god Jupiter himself had claimed you, burying you right where you fell. Then even if you did have a funeral, too much loud crying or extreme emotion was seen as chaotic and a bad look for the state, shutting down your funeral. But worst of all, if you had a child with any extreme deformities, parents were legally allowed to abandon their child to die.
What's it doing?
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, stop.
Horrifying reasons you can never survive the Titanoboa. Starting off, they were 8 times longer than you, reaching up to 50 feet long, about the width of an average home, and around 2,500 pounds, heavy as a small car. The largest snake to ever exist. But it gets worse. You wouldn't even know they were coming. Despite being as large as a bus, Titanoboas were actually ambush predators, commonly hiding in murky water, had camouflage skin, and made almost zero sound, staying almost entirely invisible when hunting you. Even more terrifying, it's estimated they could swim 8 to 12 miles per hour, easily able to outswim you. But even if you did somehow escape, Titanoboas had bodies extremely sensitive to vibrations, meaning they could feel every movement you make and find exactly where you're hiding without even needing to see you. Then if you think being on land will save you, it wasn't impossible for them to hide right on shore, within logs, under thick vegetation, or swamp grass in plain sight. But worst of all is when they catch you, capable of striking in less than a second, biting into you with a mouth that opens 3 feet wide, about half the size of your body, with teeth curved backwards, no way to escape once it bit you. And it wouldn't end quickly, slowly wrapping around your body, squeezing so hard, it would feel like a small car laying on top of you, cutting off your blood flow, all until you stop moving, swallowing you entirely whole. Imagine you're crawling through a cave and suddenly you can't move at all. This actually happened in 2009. A 26-year-old cave explorer, John Edward Jones, was exploring the Nutty Putty Cave for a family trip, a popular cave system in Utah known for having some narrow tunnels, but wasn't considered deadly and actually a beginner-friendly cave for inexperienced climbers. Also, John had climbed here years ago as a child, so he was pretty confident. Climbing deeper, eventually John made it to the most popular area of the cave called the birth canal. Not too challenging for him, but this is where things took a turn. As John continued crawling, the tunnels started getting way tighter than he remembered. Because what John didn't realize, this wasn't the birth canal. He made a completely wrong turn into an unmapped area of the cave. Thinking it would get easier, he crawled even deeper. Becoming so challenging, he had to suck in air to squeeze through. Continuing to go down further again, hoping to find a turnaround spot, when out of nowhere, a dead end. Now entirely unable to move. Pinned against the rocks so tight, he couldn't move his arms or take deep breaths. Upside down, with gravity slowly crushing his body and locking him further in place. His brother found him, tried helping, but had no luck. Called rescuers who tried assisting him, breaking rocks, and even a pulley system. But nothing they did was working, spending a full 25 hours in this nightmare, until the pressure from being upside down caused John's body to give out. Where to this day, John is still there, forever sealing off the cave as his tomb.